SQUAD has been ruined, which is what a lot of people are saying after the recent infantry combat changes, and we're going to discuss the good and the bad the people are bringing up, and if you tried it out yourself, I would love to hear your opinions on the matter, which I'm sure a lot of you have strong opinions about. When it comes to my personal opinion, I'll outright say I like the majority of the changes. However, they could tone down a couple of things in certain areas, but let's start off with OWI's mission and why they've made these changes. For starters, they want to make the game more inviting to new players and mitigate players getting domed. Fortunately, this not only affects new players, but also someone like me who has over 200 hours, but is absolutely hopeless at combat. I swear I can see the most minuscule pixel of a Viet Cong hiding in a bush 2 kilometers away in Rising Storm 2 Vietnam, but I never developed the same skill in SQUAD, which is the exact reason why I prefer to play on desert maps, but hey, at least we know that the camouflage works. Another point is to create more differences between the factions. This is especially evident when playing the MEA faction, which to some extent got the short end of the stick because the G3's recoil is extremely hard to control now, especially with a scope, but they do get the trade-off that they get the big fat beefy 7.62 bullets, which causes much more suppression, which I have utilized firsthand. The last point is that they want to make the game more closer to Project Reality with these changes. As they've stated and many other people have said, is that SQUAD has strayed too far away from the original ideals with their Kickstarter and taken on a more generic shooting mechanic, and they also want to try and encourage more teamwork, which I have seen a little bit more evidence after this update from first-hand experience. But let's move on to the actual changes, and starting off with the most significant and that has most people up in arms, which is the weapon sway. During the public testing that anyone could partake in, it was much worse, and I'm glad they toned it down to what we have today. However, I still think this is a far cry from real life, and I know some people might say, but Tantu, you're British, you have no guns and no combat experience, and to the latter I say yes, that is true, and the amount of comments that have called me British is unironically triggering me. I can't find any of the comments now that I try to look back for them, but I swear to God the comments are there and it triggered me a little bit. But enough of my personal issues. I have contacted people with military experience as well as people who have used firearms to get their opinion, and when you have the combination of adrenaline and constant weapon training, especially if you are American with a monumental gun culture, I find it really hard to believe that when you handle a firearm in SQUAD now, it feels like you're a 12-year-old in the trenches of World War I. But as my year 5 teacher said, there's always a good thing out of every bad situation. As I got older, I realized she was full of shit, but in SQUAD's case, this definitely does make engagements more lasting, more cinematic, and more fun overall to me personally. But I do agree with the sentiment that it does feel unrealistic and frustrating to deal with at times, as you try so hard to steady a shot on a target just to whiff every shot and get 180'd. The last point I'll mention on this topic is that using bipods still causes you to be extremely inaccurate with the picture-in-picture mechanics especially. Truthfully, I wouldn't even complain about the weapon sway changes if they implemented a mounting mechanic. This is something people have been asking for years. The fact I can't mount myself on a window or next to a tree to get better accuracy is baffling, especially that they didn't put it in with this update. Sorry, I'm getting a little riled up, but even the original Red Orchestra from 2006 has this mechanic. It should be an essential feature in every tactical shooter, but another thing is that it rewards players for having good spatial awareness by knowing good locations where they can get mounted, and also the fact that it can heavily negate the weapon sway mechanics that have been implemented by OWI by rewarding the player for utilizing these mechanics. But look, when you combine the weapon sway changes with the next point being the suppression changes, it can lead to more frustrating gameplay. Now, from my research and asking around what getting suppressed in real life is like, obviously your vision doesn't become blurred. and all the military training doesn't go out the window to the point where you can't bloody steady a gun, but it's a culmination in real life from what I've heard of, oh shit, I'm about to die. But you obviously can't implement this in a video game, especially with a respawn mechanic. I feel like Squad almost nailed it from a gameplay perspective, because now getting suppressed hits you hard, and it also just feels much more cinematic. It also gives machine gunners a greater purpose, and even helis doing flybys and raining down heavy caliber bullets, which is another thing I personally experienced with these changes. But I feel like weapon sway and the suppression mechanic combined has, for starters, indirectly buffed vehicles, because now it's just so incredibly hard to raise a rocket launcher and land an accurate hit. It honestly feels like my man here is loading the rocket launcher in slow motion, and it does feel tedious at times. Many years ago, when I was 16, I went to play paintball, and it was one of the most horrifying things that I've ever done, and of course you can't really compare it to getting shot at by real bullets, but being on like these dunes or sort of trenches, having my head down and just hearing it whizzing over my head, as well as it, you know, ricocheting, hitting next to me, it bloody scared me. But, you know, obviously my vision wasn't going blurred and I was like shaking around. The only thing that really affected me by being suppressed was it just made me not want to poke my head up and shoot. If I could peek my head, I was able to get a good couple of accurate shots off, but in Squad, suppression now makes you not want to peek your head, and I believe, that does a pretty good job of it. But the last point I'll bring up before we move on to some of the criticisms that I've seen on the reviews is that my mate, he was very hesitant as I was telling him through the public testing what the Squad update entails, and he was absolutely livid. He's like, oh, the game's ruined, it sucks, it's stupid. However, when he actually tried it, he actually enjoyed it because he didn't feel like he was getting domed as much, and that the firefights were more engaging, cinematic, and whatnot. And to sum up my own personal beliefs, I believe that we have to tone down the weapon sway much more so that you aren't flailing around 4 Jack Daniels deep. I'm okay with keeping the suppression system. I personally really like the implementation, and I do enjoy the more slower paced movement that they've incorporated, excluding loading the rockets because it's just a little bit too frustrating in my opinion. But I do look forward to seeing how they adjust, if they do, the changes in the future, as well as other updates and gameplay changes that they implement, because it makes the game feel fresh and new to me. But let's have a look at some of the points that people are making, especially when it comes to Steam reviews, which is drastically different to the people that I have encountered in the game who said that they are thoroughly enjoying it. But the most glaring complaint I see is the weapon sway. Some people, like one guy said, it feels like giving your Vietnam vet grandpa with Parkinson's an M16, and another person compared it to downing 4 bottles of Jack Daniels. With a side note, I can unironically fly good in Squad if I've had a couple of tinnies. If I'm sober, I am the worst pilot. But I do agree to an extent that the weapon sway currently is too much and they still need to tweak it. I believe that a middle ground between pre 6.0 and the current version would do, simply for the fact that I believe it can still have its desired effect on prolonging firefights, encouraging suppression and stamina management. But I will counter the reviewers' arguments by saying that now you gotta be a little more smarter in how you play the game. Your movement is much more slower, and you can't, annoyingly, you can't jump on the lodges in main anymore and do push-ups that sound like violent sex noises, but it makes me be a little bit more smarter in my movement and trying to get good positions such as windows or leaning around a corner to try and steady myself and ambush an enemy. But some people might say that this slows down gameplay even more in an already slow-paced game, and I will agree with that. However, just be thankful they didn't take the Project Reality route route of giving you limited stamina. And I also believe that, you know, for a while the game has had a bit of an identity crisis that they're now trying to recover from. And to some people, this unfortunately means slowing down the gameplay. And staying on that topic, not just weapon sway, but the actual recoil now with weapons is unrealistic, especially when firing low caliber bullets like 5.56, and you're probably wondering what my source is, and well, it's Operator Drewski full autoing an M16 with a grenade launcher, and you know, he can keep it really steady. He's not bouncing around like he's fucking drunk off his ass. As an Aussie, I'd look at this video with absolute jealousy. But the last thing to conclude everything that I've said, Squad is a team-based game. It's not about the kills. It was never about the kills. Sure, getting kills reduces the enemy's tickets, but someone lone gunning and running off and trying to get, I don't know, maybe 20 kills is not as effective as a squad of mediocre players working together, trying to flank, try and disorientate the enemy by providing constant suppressive fire, getting into flanking positions, building stuff, and just trying not to be rushing or running around like a madman. I believe to an extent that this update achieves its goal of trying to encourage more teamwork, at least with the people that I've played. But just to put it out there, if you don't like this update, in the future on the Discord, I'll link it down below, they have constant announcements for public testing. There's always a feedback form. It's for you to give your feedback on if you want to be as harsh as possible as you want. But all in all, I like most of the changes they've implemented, and I hope they continue to fine-tune it. But nonetheless, please like the video. It really does help with the algorithm. And if you didn't like the video, dislike it. And well, I mean, that still helps with the algorithm, so I don't really care. But also please leave a comment, especially because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this update. But nonetheless, my name is Tan2, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.